Hello and welcome to GreenFleet Talks. My name is Kate Armitage and I'm your host for our discussion today. I'm delighted to be joined by Natasha Fry, Head of Strategic Accounts at EV charging company MER. Hi,
hey,
Natasha.
Good morning.
Lovely to speak to you again. It's been a while.
It has. I'm delighted. Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. And I know that you've been very busy, Natasha, because I keep hearing MER popping up everywhere.
That's good.
Today, we're going to be discussing charging infrastructure for logistics companies with a focus on final mile fleet. And I know that that's something that you have extensive experience of.
I do. Yeah, it's a pretty exciting place to be right now, Kate, and I'm delighted that you've seen how MER is making kind of progress in the markets. That's excellent.
Yeah, things are really moving on. So we are focusing on last mile logistics operators. What would you say is the biggest challenge that they're facing when it comes to delivering their EV transition goals?
This is perhaps going to be one of the largest projects organisations have to face right now. You know, you look at the vehicles as probably the first priority in terms of what vehicles can actually do the job when they transition from the pure ICE into EV. But I think hand in hand with that is the EV charging infrastructure. I think the biggest challenge, and I'm going to just put it out there, is probably a lack of understanding around, you know, the wider implications of trying to introduce electrification into an organisation. For last mile organisations and logistics, you know, there's going to be a huge demand on increased power coming into certain locations. And let's face it, a lot of these buildings that they operate from were never designed to have EV charging and lots of power pumped into, you know, equipment out in a car park or in the back of a depot. So it's going to be power. And I think with that comes the implications that surround it, you know, the challenges around how they can upgrade power into their sites and cost, you know, and the process can be quite complex. So I think though, for me, I think that's what I've seen over the last couple of years working with some of the major fleet organisations. That's what we've seen. And I think that's where we can help.
Oh, okay. So I totally agree with you, Natasha, because my background is on the electricity industry side. It's probably worth adding that the other complexity with this is that it is totally site specific. So unfortunately, you can't just do a cut and paste and say, well, what worked at that depot will work at this depot.
Absolutely. I mean, Kate, you couldn't be more spot on with that assumption, because every site will have varying levels of operating levels and they'll have different vehicles, and each distribution network operator, what we call a DNO, will have certain parameters around the process you need to go through to upgrade that power. And then it all depends on where you are as an organisation, what else is on that estate or that industrial area, because everybody is going to start, if they haven't already, inquiring about looking into the future. From a future proofing point of view, it's about how much power can we have and how much is it going to cost us. And it sounds really simple when you say it that way, but it's not. Trust me, it isn't. And it's a process that can be quite laborious. However, if you get it right and you do engage with experts at the front end, you know, people like MER, we have all of the tools to be able to help you with that analysis at the front end. And, you know, we talk about consulting with our customers, and I couldn't tell you how important it is for customers to sit down, take stock, and not just look through tunnel vision. It may be, you know, because electrification will always happen over in my experience, a phased approach. So organizations will be given sustainability targets, for example, where they may say, we need the full fleet or 30% of the fleet to be electrified by this point in time. So it's probably a bit pointless looking at that first phase in isolation. You have to think of the bigger picture, and you have to understand, is it practical and realistic for this fleet to transition over to electric? And how long is it realistically going to take us once we understand the financial implications, as well as, implications to the logistics of the operation. So it is a bit of a minefield, but don't get me wrong, it's one that we can navigate through effectively. It needs, I think people need our help.
And because you're talking about logistics companies and final mile operators, this is their bread and butter. It's not that they have a core business that is something else. Their entire business is around operating vehicles efficiently.
Oh, those vehicles, Kate, are business critical. And the charging infrastructure that goes into a logistics organization is a country mile from public charging, for example. The dependence on those chargers delivering the right amount of power, because the chargers, you typically need more of them in a fleet environment, you're gonna have to design a charging infrastructure that may not. So, for example, you may put lower powered chargers in because they're going to be parked all night, for example. And there's lots of sophisticated technology around load balancing and smart charging that can really help organizations use the power that's a bit redundant during the night, if that makes sense. So straight away, there's lots of things that we can do to help organizations through their phases. And we don't really go away, we talk to our customers at the front end, and then there's always a desire to make sure that we're putting the right charges in the right place, delivering the right amount of power.
Okay, all right. So let's just unpick that a bit because it's quite intimidating, isn't it? You've got a fleet manager who historically has never needed to have any understanding of the capacity, electricity capacity on their site, and they're suddenly thrown into this new world. So how are you helping those companies address this challenge?
So for us, I think it's super important to get under the skin of these things and being able to come onto site. And you talk about it being depot specific, which is absolutely correct. The idea, I think, behind all of that is to be able to meet with these fleet managers that might feel a little bit overwhelmed with it all and just take it back to basics and just explain that we're there to help. I think site surveys, so electrical site surveys, are an absolute must at that particular moment, because we need to understand, and organisations that provide this infrastructure need to understand what we're working with from level playing field from day one. What does this building look like? And from that, you tend to then determine what the business needs. So the site surveys, the electrical site surveys, I believe are fundamental in terms of getting some true factual data around the power that's currently available. And if they were, as a desire, there's a wish list in terms of how many chargers they would want. And we need to help and understand the logistical movements of that fleet, whether it's slower chargers that's required, whether it needs an element of rapid chargers. And you touched on, these last mile logistics operators look at electrification major, and they start off probably major cities because the miles that these vehicles are doing will probably work within the current ranges in the vehicles that are becoming available. But very soon they're going to have to think about going further afield, and they're going to have to think about vehicles coming back to base and needing a top-up charge. So it's all about that electrical site survey, which will help them understand what's available today, and then what do they need moving forward.
Absolutely. And it really does underpin a lot of the planning in terms of how many, which sites are you going to prioritize, where, which vehicles can you electrify first based on what your sites are currently capable of. And then, what's the scale of the challenge going forward in terms of available power or indeed the cost of upgrade.
These guys are in a very fortunate position because this is all very data heavy, and they have it. Yeah. So they are very familiar with operating the logistics of the business through, they may have platforms on their vehicles in telematics, for example. So they need to treat the charging infrastructure in a similar way, understanding what these vehicles are doing. And as I say, fleet organizations are not new to that kind of analytical, looking at that type of analytics and trying to understand which vehicles it would suit. And then one would hope, as phases start to happen through phase 1s and 2s, where you're looking at the more city deliveries, vehicles start to improve on range and and battery capacity is going to improve. So the manufacturers will start to come, we hope, and we think that's the way it will go, but every manufacturer will start to improve on what these vehicles can do. So, there's lots of exciting things coming, and I think that's why a phased approach is the right thing to do, and not trying to put in the entire EV charging infrastructure from day one, because it's still a bit of an unknown, isn't it, in terms of what's becoming available and what vehicles will be there for them to use.
100%. So, and you touched on this a minute ago, Natasha, because you talked about different speeds of EV charger. So first of all, you've got to make a decision whether you're going to go AC or DC. AC
That's
typically
right.
being slower, and also you're limited by what the vehicle onboard charger can do. Or you can go to DC, which is more expensive upfront for the equipment, but potentially is a better route. I think when I talk to people, it's very tempting, isn't it, to say, well, I want rapid chargers, just in case. I want rapid chargers everywhere.
Absolutely.
Okay, how do you, what's the process that you go through? Because I'm hoping, and from people that I've spoken to, you don't just put in 100 rapid chargers. So what's that process that you go through in terms of actually understanding what they need and making sure that you don't overspec the infrastructure?
And Kate, that's a great point, because I have to say, in my career, many people I speak to, first and foremost, want a rapid charger because they understand the convenience and they understand. But you're right, there are a couple of major points to consider. The first one is the cost. It is more expensive to put a rapid charger. They're bigger pieces of equipment. They're technically more advanced, and they can deliver higher amounts of power, which brings me nicely onto the second point. The power differentiator between an AC and a DC is huge. So the likelihood of an organization today having the capacity to put in a rapid charger, they may get away with one or two, but the likelihood of them putting in any more, there's going to be constraints on the grid, and they're going to have to apply for an upgrade anyway. So those are the first two things we would always explain to our customers so they understand the differences. There will be occasion where rapid chargers absolutely fit the model of the business, but it's about understanding what vehicles are they going to be charging, and how long are they going to be stationary at any point. And there's going to be a mix of infrastructure going in. And, I don't really want to labour on the 80-20 rule, but it seems to work quite well. Where you've got a major fleet organisation, 80% of the fleet pretty much can rely on that overnight charge that will give the vehicle sufficient power to go and do its daily routes, for example, and it can come back in the evening. We're just working with a major retailer right now, and that's the model that we've adopted. And then you look at, okay, now you're looking at the routes and you're understanding from your telematics that vehicles are going to be coming back through certain points of the day. How many times are they coming back and how long are they loading for? And it's about just making sure that we're delivering the right level of DC. There's varying levels of DC power as well, Kate. So it starts at kind of, you've got like a 24 kilowatt charger and it goes right the way up. And the most common EV charger in Europe right now is probably the 50 kilowatt in a fleet environment. So because that can charge, depending on what the vehicle can take, you're looking at no longer than an hour really. And some people can fit that around a driver's lunch break or the next shift pattern happening. But then the extreme is you've got assets that could potentially be sweated 24/7, where that one vehicle just has driver switches as opposed to so it could be so rapid charging in that scenario is overnight charging wouldn't work. So it's about getting under the skin, and it's not about putting people off of the rapids, because there are genuine business cases for having rapid chargers, but it's making sure that from the very upfront offset that customers understand the cost difference, the power implications, and making sure that the data that sits behind it makes sense, and it makes sense to put the business case forward. The good thing is, and I've got one final bit to say on that, is Smart chargers come with intelligent back office platforms. And a lot of organizations that dip their toe into this, I think, are pretty astounded by the level of data that can be collected in the background. You've kind of got your business case written for phases 2, 3, 4, 5 and beyond. Phase 1 is a bit more difficult to get through the business. You know, the CapEx expenditure for EV charging infrastructure is not cheap. There are certain funding methods that us at MER can offer, you know, financing, leasing. But that initial investment can be quite a tricky one to get across the directors of the business in terms of getting signed off. Once that smart charging back office intelligent network starts collecting the data, it tells you that the chargers are being absolutely utilized in the correct way, and it's now time to invest in the next stage.
Or not being utilized properly, which may require operational change off the back of it, or it may mean that you need to move that charger to somewhere else because the business has changed the way it works. So
absolutely. I mean, we don't underestimate the level of what you can actually do once you start collecting that data. It's so important to the business. And, you know, these last mile logistics operators, you know, are working under really strict timeframes to get these vehicles out doing deliveries. You know, the consequences of not having those vehicles out doing the job it's supposed to do can be pretty catastrophic for a business. So these chargers need to be in the right place, delivering the right power. And that's where the back office can really come into itself and start to help organizations.
All right. Okay. I was going to come on to that because, you know, I mean, I use the phrase back office a lot, and you know, people do stop me and kind of say, well, what does that mean? So you've gone through your site survey process. The physical infrastructure has been designed. You've decided what speed of charges you want, whether it's AC or DC, where they're going to be located. It's been installed. But then what is this, you know, the post installation? Tell me a bit more about the back office in terms of what it does and why it's so important.
Oh, the back office, Kate, is the glue to all of this. The front end bit, and it's not easy, don't get me wrong, but that's the bit that once it's in, if you purchase the right hardware, which is robust, reliable, does the job it's supposed to do, delivering the right amount of power, you hope to forget about it at that point. You've made that investment, you've got the right charger, it's in the ground. The back office management platform is the glue to everything, and it gives everybody that's interested the visibility. So it kind of has two interfaces. So the first one is the driver interface, and that's a really simple way of working for drivers. It's, you know, they tap an RFID tag onto the charger connects to the back office, it talks to each other in the vehicle, and then it starts to collect the data. So from a driver point of view, we try and make it as simple as possible. We don't want any of these apps that the driver has to go through. The driver's not paying for the fuel or for the energy that's going into that vehicle, it's the organization. So simple is our mantra when it comes to depot charging and last mile logistics. The second interface is probably the most important in this scenario, and that's we call it a CPO. So it's the charge point operator. So it's the owner and the operator of that equipment has access to what we call a back office management platform. And that will show them data based on either a total kind of holistic view. So if you can imagine you're a major fleet operator and you've got 100 depots across the UK, you're going to have a team of people that are very interested into the total performance of what those chargers are doing. So it can give high level view on charger performance. And the key things it will show you is who's charging and when they're charging, the level of power that's going into those vehicles, the kilowatt hours that are utilized, the emissions that you're saving in that scenario. And it's those, and then it can be driven down into certain levels, and you can have access levels. So I could be a fleet manager or a store manager or a depot manager, and my organization might only want me to see the charging data for my store or my depot. So that's what the back office management platform is there for, and it's designed to do. And it gives everybody the same level of data you would expect and more from your switch from ICE. You've got fuel card management, you're aware and you're familiar with the data that collects. It's the same principle, really. It's a bit like having a fuel card. It just collects all of the data that you're interested in, and it's there to self-serve, really. And you can pull lots and lots of reports off, and it's very data driven. A lot of analysts get quite excited by the level of data it can produce. But it's all there, and it's super important you have that. And not only does it have the two interfaces, Kate, but that's the whole platform that, especially here at MER, that's what we use then to keep these chargers online. Right. So that's our platform. So the back office management platform allows us to remotely dial into the charging infrastructure, right, and to fix any issues that arise, and it needs to be quickly. You know, it would be pointless putting in a service level agreement that was designed for a public charger. You need to think about fleet operators, and their service level agreements are quite strict. You know, they need within a couple of hours to have these chargers back online and working, because overnight, if a charger goes down and there's no power coming to that vehicle, that platform needs to be sophisticated enough to be able to tell us that there's a problem.
You can't wait until 7 o'clock in the morning to realise it hasn't.
I think we'd have a bunch of unhappy drivers and customers there, Kate. So that's the biggest difference. You've got a logistical operation that relies heavily on those vehicles turning the ignition first thing in the morning, and off they go with a full battery. And any consequences to that not happening can be pretty disastrous. I know I've touched on that before, but it just cannot be underestimated.
Okay. And I guess now you're starting now to talk about the aftercare support that you can offer your clients with your ability to access the back office and monitor what's happening.
Yeah, I think for me, that's the bit where I get quite excited, because I've been in this industry, Kate, for a very long time. And whilst I appreciate that things are getting better, you know, EV charging is still a bit of a taboo subject, because when we're out on the public network and we're driving between meetings and we're trying to use a charger, and, you know, the amount of times I've pulled up to one and it's not working, or my app doesn't work, or the fob's not working, or the charger's not, it's just derelict, or, you know, so for me, that aftercare piece is fundamental to giving our customers the confidence that we're the right partner to work with. Yes. It's about having that 24/7 access. So we support our customers 24/7. We recognise the importance of a charger not being available. So we support all of that through we have a contact centre in the Northeast, and we work with the AA for all of our kind of out of hours aftercare. So we respond very quickly. As I mentioned before, with them being smart units, a lot of what we can do when we dial into the units can actually be fixed pretty much straight away remotely. So it's just about having that person, or at the end of the phone, able to dial into the charger and recognise that there's a potential problem. You know, there's a high percentage of the calls we get come from driver error. I hate to say it, not connecting the charging cable correctly. So we also offer a huge amount of training with our customers too. So you get face-to-face representatives from our business coming on. I mean, I do sessions with fleet drivers in certain scenarios quite frequently, where I would go in and just explain what the chargers are all about, the power it's delivering, not to be scared of it. It's super simple. This is what you do to start the charge and to stop it. And if you get a problem, follow this process. And we have to make it simple, Kate. These drivers, whilst the organisation can be quite detailed around what they need, the driver ultimately is doing his shift. He's coming back in the evening, or whatever time of the day it might be, depending on the operating hours. And he goes, I just need to plug this in, and I need to walk away and go home to my family. As soon as there's an issue, we need to be all over that, and we need to make sure that we give those comfort and the confidence levels are maintained. So for us, it's super, super important, I think, the aftercare piece.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm smiling because this is the beauty of fleets. You know, you talked about the public charging infrastructure, and we must make sure that fleet charging doesn't get tarred with the same brush, because it's really, really different. It's much more akin, I would say, to home charging. You know the vehicles that are going to be using it. It's the same drivers day in, day out. You've got the confidence of knowing that infrastructure is there and will be available for you when you need it, because it's all been planned and managed.
Absolutely.
Whereas, you know, if someone has had a bad experience with the public charging network, and I would challenge anyone who says they haven't had an issue, because, you know, it's not perfect, isn't the public charging network? But don't let that, you know, mold your views on what fleet charging looks like, because it's a completely different beast.
Oh, it is, Kate. And I agree with you 100%. I think the one thing we do have on our side is, with fleet managers and fleet organisations, I think they do understand that it is a little bit different, because they understand how their vehicles operate right now, relying on fuel, for example. So there is a higher level of understanding, but there is still, you're absolutely right, to, the public charging infrastructure, in my view, is getting so much better, but I get caught out quite a lot, Kate. I try and plan. The key thing is the planning with the fleets, and you touched on that. There's a committed amount of power required, and these things, they know exactly what needs to happen, and customers are becoming more astute to making sure that their service level agreements that they have with companies like MER are designed with their needs in mind, and it's fit for purpose, and it doesn't leave them exposed. And I think that's where our experience, within MER, I'm going to say this, but we are experts in this, right? We've been doing it a long, long time, and we've worked with some of the UK's largest fleets right now. And, they've helped us understand this a little bit better. So we've gone into this with our eyes wide open, thinking we know, but we can only gather what we know from experience. And we've been fortunate enough to just work with our clients, and they've been so open-minded with us, and we're pretty flexible here. My background, I've come from a huge corporate background, and what I do recognise at MER is, nothing is a no. There's always a way, and there's always something we can do for our customers to help them on this journey. We need to recognise that they're new to this. And flexibility and having that understanding, I think, is paramount in what we do.
And from talking to you, Natasha, you'd said that your customers are becoming more astute in terms of what they're asking for and what they're expecting. But I think a key message that I have is that remember, you're procuring a service, you're not procuring hardware. And I think it's really easy to get caught up in that what wall boxes are we going to have conversation, and forget the aftercare, forget the back office, forget the uptime and all of those great things that you're offering.
I agree, Kate. And it comes back to, it's not a commodity, is it? What we're selling is a service, and it needs to be viewed in that way. And, that's where the sales process can become quite tricky sometimes. We do come up against competitors that are offering hardware in different guises. And sometimes, the messages can get a little bit diluted. But I think the aftercare piece is the most important, Chargers are much of a muchness, in my view. They deliver, you've got chargers delivering AC power, DC power. We here at MER work with two of the most established manufacturers in this space. Alfen are proven, and they've been around for such a long time. And since our inception, when we were Elmtronics, we've worked with them since 2014. We understand the hardware. We're approved to do all the warranty work. So to speed up the process to get these things working and online, installed correctly as per the regulations and standards, you couldn't work with a more established partner with MER, I think, with the hardware manufacturers. And then we work with ABB for our DC chargers, and these things are technical, Kate, and they are going to, the components will fail, right? I'm not saying they won't. It's all about how you respond and you react to customers in those scenarios.
Totally agree. And working with reputable hardware providers who can provide spare parts or hold stock for you, again, all of these things are part of the wider picture, aren't they?
Exactly. Well, we hold stock actually for our manufacturers. So all of our own engineers will come out and do the servicing and the maintenance of the equipment. So we offer that as part of the package. So we do the health checks twice a year. So every 6 months we'll come out and make sure that these chargers are, electrically sound and that they pass the service inspection. But we do carry spare parts, and we do carry all the bits that we know can fail. So we like to think we're a little bit of a step ahead. But there are occasions where, we do have to replace a charger. I mean, it doesn't happen very often, I hasten to add, especially the DCs. I mean, the DCs are bulletproof. You kind of replace parts as opposed to a total refresh of a charger. I've never known a full charger to have to be replaced because of an issue. But it's that reaction time, isn't it? And with us doing all of that in-house, we don't rely on any third parties to do any kind of contract maintenance for us. That's super important because we retain a high level of control, and our levels of service are pretty high, and we need to maintain that. And I think the only way we do that is by keeping a real control on what we do internally.
It's also important, Natasha, the whole picture. We are running out of time. I did want to say we've been focusing on urban last mile delivery fleets, but actually, what advice would you give to any fleet that is just starting this journey into EV?
get the experts in early, right? Irrelevant of what you think it might look like, it's going to evolve and it's going to change, and you need to be armed with the facts, and you can have an expert help you. And clearly that's, MER, we are primary positioned to be those experts. That's what I believe. I'm so passionate about what we do here, and I don't want our customers to get this wrong, and I don't want people to it's a costly mistake to make. So my one piece of advice is get somebody in that can do the full end-to-end service offering, from consultancy right through to the aftercare, but get somebody in really early, start those conversations happening, understand the pressures on the grid that you may have to be susceptible to, and start just understanding what the business. You're not committed at that point, you just need somebody that knows what they're talking about to provide you with that level of help and support and guidance to get you to a point where you just feel a bit more comfortable, and you can differentiate between the AC, DC, and you understand the power coming into the building. So get us in early would be my main piece of advice.
Great advice. Ask the expert, and if you haven't already, pick up the phone and talk to MER before you go any further.
Excellent. Kate, it's been such a pleasure. I could talk to you all day about this subject. But I do appreciate we've covered so much, and I certainly appreciate the opportunity that you've given to have a chat with me. It's been delightful.
We'll have a follow-up call, definitely. And thank you to MER for joining GreenFleet Talks. And of course, thank you for watching. Please tune in to GF365 again soon.